Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of City Council Watch. Long time no see, lots of changes, but we're back again with another great episode, and this one is jam-packed with some info that you cannot wait to hear. We're gonna take a look at how City Council reacts to supposed changes to police accountability and the dialogue that they have about it. Let's jump into the video.
Hey, and welcome back, or if it's your first time joining us, welcome. My name is Megan, she, her, hers with Tampa Bay Activist Network, and I'm always happy to be here spreading the word on what's happening at City Council. Today, we're gonna talk about Thursday, May 20th. It wasn't quite as dull as previous meetings, so we're pretty excited to share with you what went down.
Yes, and I'm Tori. Maybe you forgot me, but I'm Tori, she, her, hers with the Black Elective Movement of Tampa, and you know, I have to say it. I have to. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video, make sure you engage in the comments, and keep coming back each and every time that we post a new episode so we can continue to learn with one another.
All right, so let's dive in. May 20th was intense from the jump. It all started with a hot button issue that's been on the forefront of the Tampa community's mind since all of the uprisings over last summer. More accountability and transparency for the Citizen Review Board that supposedly monitors the Tampa Police Department.
Right. As you may have noticed, our city council and mayor love cops. I mean, our mayor is one. Last year, hundreds upon hundreds of Tampa residents spoke up and demanded for defunding the police and refunding the community. We talk about this almost every episode. Despite this, they actually increased TPD's budget by over $13 million and have added more funds, including grants and donations, ever since. It's safe to say TPD is Tampa's spoiled child, and that means that they get to have their way every single time they have any type of tantrum.
We are not going to defund the police.
Before we go into the subject deeper, we should give you a little bit of backstory on the Citizen Review Board, what it does, and what the changes that are being voted on involve. In 2015, a grassroots organization known as Tampa for Justice, along with Black Lives Matter Tampa, began circulating a ballot initiative to the voters. The purpose of this was to get a question on the ballot to allow voters to decide if a citizen review board should be created to monitor activity by the Tampa Police Department.
Exactly, and the ballot initiative actually did not pass. One thing that is important to know is that Florida has a state law known as the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. The LEO-BOR is an oppressive law that grants police officers and correctional officers absurd extra privileges and rights. One of those privileges is the ability to review evidence against them at a time of their own convenience before a disciplinary hearing. Other privileges include that disciplinary action cannot be made by these review boards, so they can't suspend, demote, or terminate police officers. And they also can't directly subpoena officers. So due to the law, citizen review boards are already pretty much worthless.
Right, and although the 2015 ballot initiative had not passed, former Mayor Bob Buckhorn went ahead and created one anyway, to appease us, I guess. But naturally, he watered it down even more than necessary. Essentially, the Citizen Review Board does, well, a whole lot of nothing. The members of the board will tell you otherwise, and they don't even get paid to lie about it. It's all volunteer, but hey.
The ACLU responded to these uprisings last summer by requesting additional transparency and accountability in the Citizens Review Board, including allowing City Council to make appointments to the board, which currently only is done by the mayor, granting Mayor Castor an obscene amount of unchecked power. Other areas that the ACLU advocated for was subpoena power, not for officers, since that is preempted by the state, but for witnesses and documents. They also want the board to have its own full-time dedicated legal aid. None of these ideas are particularly radical. In fact, it's far from it, and barely would scratch the surface on true accountability.
And honestly, the People's Safety Coalition hasn't spent much time or energy on the subject. We're more concerned with actual structural changes, such as defund the police and refund the community. We can't help but notice, however, that some city council members, as well as Darla Portman, the police union president, and Mayor Castor are so terrified over this half of a fraction of transparency and accountability. It really makes you go,
It's funny to me that the police and those who love them tend to say things like, if you have nothing to hide, you wouldn't be worried about police pulling you over. So I guess they must have something to hide. I mean, I don't guess, I know they do, but still, think about it.
So before we talk about how they voted on the Citizen Review Board situation, we should play some clips of their discussion for what is known as charter amendments. We mentioned a little bit earlier that the CRB was going to be put up as a charter amendment via voter initiative. One other way the charter can be amended is what is known as charter review commissions, in which appointed citizens serve and the public can come comment.
Our friends at the Restorative Justice Coalition organized 30 or so residents to come speak at that commission in 2018 and created a charter amendment that required the entire city staff to participate in mandatory implicit bias training. This went on the ballot in 2019 and became enforced via ordinance in 2020, thanks to a grassroots effort. Because charter amendments carry more weight than do regular ordinances, they usually have to go through the voters to become law. The voters typically vote on these issues during the mayoral and city council election, which takes place in 2023. Several of the issues of concern are related to how the new changes of the CRB could be applied to the charter. Councilmember Carlson starts off discussion, but gets a little bit of pushback from Councilmember Dingfelder. Let's take a watch.
I think that we ought to, like 6 months before the election, have a workshop on charter amendments. The underlying issue on subpoenas is that City Council, even though we have investigative authority, that we don't specifically have subpoena power. And so there would be a long discussion about whether a charter amendment, if proposed by the community, should be specifically for CRB or should be for City Council, just to clarify the charter.
I like the idea generally, Mr. Carlson. I think that 6 months is a little tight to the election. So I think if we're going to have that discussion, I would suggest start a year out, and then that way maybe it's done, you know, a few months later, and give the supervisor plenty of time to put something on the ballot.
So essentially, there's a small debate about how much time they need as a council to discuss any possible changes to the charter before the election. The idea to push back any charter changes doesn't sit well with Councilmember Miranda either. It seems he's a little antsy, so to speak, about the recruitment of Tampa police officers. Here's his stance.
You have to understand that the individuals that are seeking to become police officers or sheriffs or whatever in law enforcement, they don't know what's going on. We're either going to have to decide today, I hope, to say this is what we're going to do or this is what we're not going to do. We got elected to make the choices. It's getting tougher and tougher to recruit individuals to go into law enforcement. And the reason is that they're judged on something that's 1/100th of a second decision that they have to make that you and I don't have to make.
It's wild to me. Interesting even. So Councilmember Miranda says that the discussion of whether or not the police will have an extra fraction of accountability will help new recruits decide to get the job or not. I have an idea. Reject the application of anyone who applies that is opposed to being held accountable. How about that?
As someone who's in the healthcare field, I can tell you this. Healthcare professionals are accountable to the public and can have their license fined, suspended, or even revoked if they cause harm to the public, even on accident. And while the system doesn't stop all of the bad things, I'm looking at you, medical transphobia, it certainly helps prevent some harms and gives the public an opportunity to seek assistance when they feel they or someone they love has been harmed.
Yes, for example, let's say a nurse is at the hospital and is instructed by her boss to reuse needles on a patient, an obvious health hazard. The nurse is told to do this with the help of profits. If the nurse does this, even though she was told by her boss, she has risked her own license, which could mean she would be unable to serve as a nurse any longer for any employer. This extra layer of accountability means that doctors, nurses, CNAs, and so on will follow a standard for medical care practices, no matter the conditions that they have in their workplace, no matter how shady their bosses are, and any other issue that could arise. This helps protect the public because the professionals are accountable not just to individuals signing their checks, but to the Department of Health as well. While EMTs have a similar licensing structure, no such mechanism exists in the United States for police, despite their ability to kill someone on the job and to take someone else's liberty.
And as we've seen, cops aren't often afraid of violating anyone's rights or taking their lives because they have protection by qualified immunity and a law enforcement bill of rights, and can often get hired at other police departments in the rare event that they're fired in the first place. Not even hairstylists can move that freely. Even they can have their license revoked by the state. If that doesn't alarm you, I don't know what will. Councilmember Vieira, I don't know what to say about him. I mean, he thinks the subject needs more discussion, but I have to admit, he seems a bit salty about it. I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know. Councilmember Vieira sure wants to hold off on this subject, and I wonder why. Regardless, they wind up talking about it later on. Number 52, which by the way was conveniently left off of the agenda until after the meeting took place. So ironic, the lack of transparency on this ordinance about transparency. Before we dive into that, we should mention that a city council workshop has been scheduled for February 24th, 2022 to discuss charter amendments. If you have big ideas about how to make Tampa a better place for the most marginalized folks, now is the time to start thinking about charter amendment ideas.
Why not share your idea? You can think of something you'd like to see changed, post it in the comments. We aren't attorneys, but we might know some, so we can check to see if any proposals conflict with the state or federal law. You, the people, have the ideas, the talent, the skill. You can also email us at the People's Safety Coalition at gmail.com, any ideas that you have. And of course, you can sign up to become a member.
Okay, so there was a lot going around in the discussions around this new ordinance. City Council, the legal team, and Chief Dugan were all visibly upset at the whole situation, and we saw the pressure get to them on multiple occasions. The main thing to note is that the legal team tried repeatedly to explain to City Council that they, the legal team, have bent over backwards in their attempts to answer City Council's questions and concerns, respond to edits made by council members, and draft up version after version after version of this ordinance in question. However, there comes to be an argument about how the law is being interpreted by the city attorney, Mrs. Grimes.
What Ms. Grimes is saying is that the ordinance as it stands is violating the checks and balances or separation of powers that are in the charter. Basically, City Council is the legislative body and the mayor is the executive body. And there are things each can and cannot do.
As the legislative branch, the City Council has the power to draft and pass laws. However, in the charter, there is one big exception which the City Council cannot impose their powers on, and that is on the management and control of the police department. That power goes to the mayor, as she is the executive branch and the chief of police.
By saying that, Ms. Grimes states that the ordinance, which has been drafted in accordance to City Council's edits back in February, should not be passed as it's a violation of the separation of powers, which causes a lot of heated discussion and an opinion from every single council member except for Citro, who stays quiet until the last second.
The legal team is pretty clear. For this ordinance to pass, according to the charter, it must have originated from the mayor's office, since she is the only one to have power to do this. Since it did not originate from her office, technically it's out of the law. But Mayor Castor and Chief Dugan have agreed to move forward with the ordinance.
Well, City Council makes a big deal about, well, why are we reverting back to the February version if no one opposed it in all these months? There's really only one difference between the two versions, and that is how many members from the CRB the mayor appoints and how many the City Council appoints.
But instead of explaining to you how many times the version has changed and which version people support, let's fast forward and confirm. The version City Council voted to move forward on was 7 members are appointed by City Council, 1 by each council member, and 4 by the mayor. And one of those 4 must be from the NAACP. Vieira was talking about percentages and wanting to ensure that a 99% agreed upon document should not be held up by a 1% disputed item, which to us isn't the best math. Miranda kept talking about how he didn't want to turn into Washington, D.C. by not letting things get done, and then turns around and votes no to this. Personally, I think they just wanted to be able to say that they were fighting with their coworkers.
I think they all wanted to get in on some of the action. Dinkfelder was unusually pressed throughout the whole discussion and seems to take personal offense to every time the city attorney spoke to council.
Well, what about when Dinkfelder and Chief Dugan basically broke up in front of all of us?
Yeah, that was tough to watch.
Some of the comments that I've had to sit here and listen to, Mr. Dinkfelder talk about Gina Grimes carrying my water. You know, I appreciate that, but nobody carries Brian Dugan's water.
It's worth mentioning that Dugan spoke at length about how he felt wronged by City Council despite his attempts to listen more and talk less, and that the officers won't be able to operate under these poor conditions. They are so damn bad. But what conditions? Being held accountable for their actions taken at their job. We all have reviews, Dugan. We all are held accountable. Except you.
And he kept harping on how police officers have to make split-second decisions.
Nobody asked.
And that will paralyze them from doing their jobs if they feel like their decisions will have, what word am I looking for?
Repercussions, accountability, consequences, actions taken against it. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Exactly. And like every other job out there, really.
I don't want to give Dugan too much time in the spotlight, because it's already been too much, but you can clearly see that his opposition to what he calls civilian insight, the CRB, exemplifies that his actions to listen to the people have been entirely performative. And I'm not gonna lie to you, the performance is ugly. We don't like it. As soon as something would actually create accountability and tangible action, Chief Dugan is gatekeeping TPD, and Mayor Castor is right there with him. Lapdogs together, I would say.
There was a lot to digest, but thanks to our excellent research team, thank you guys so much, we cut the nonsense to give you a digestible play-by-play of the events of May 20th.
And listen, I already said it once, but it doesn't hurt to say it twice. Don't forget to subscribe, because that's the only way we know anyone's listening. I mean, we don't want to be talking to a boy here. And be sure to turn on that notification bell, because why wouldn't you? Don't you want to see our face?
All right, my name is Megan, she, her, hers, with Tampa Bay Activist Network.
And I'm Tori with the Black Collective Movement in Tampa, signing off.